Hi, it's Dre Griggs of Obsidian Wisdom. Today I'll share with you my retirement planning guidebook for families to make sure that when you retire, you stay retired, that you enjoy your retirement, and that you have peace of mind. When I talk to my clients and we talk about retirement, why it's important, how do I make sure that I enjoy mine, most of the time I'm usually saying, hey, what is the most important part of retirement? And most people will say happiness or health, or we want to make sure our family is okay. We want to make sure we have enough money. There's so much that goes into a retirement to make sure it's successful that's often why you hear me say it's more than riches. That is true about all aspects of life. The success of your family, it's about more than riches. Your retirement is more than riches. Whether you enjoy your job is more than riches. Whether you have a plan, it's not always about the money. Now, the money is important, and we're going to talk a lot about it, but we have to put it in the right context. Our goal is not to get the money. Our goal is to be able to use the money to build comfort, to build the freedom, to build the flexibility, so we can then do the things we want to enjoy. Now, sometimes we're willing to sacrifice some things that maybe we wouldn't if we really thought about it. It reminds me of the story of the fisherman and the businessman. And there was this fisherman, he would wake up at 5 in the morning, he would go fish for about 4 hours, so it's about 9 o'clock when he's done, and then he goes home. The businessman noticed that he kept doing that. Now, granted, every time the businessman saw the fisherman's boat, he always noticed that it was full of fish. And he just really was trying to figure out why the guy doesn't fish all day, because if he fished all day, he can have so much more money. And so one day, the businessman went up to the fisherman and he said, hey, I've noticed that you stopped fishing around 9 a.m., can I ask you why? The fisherman was like, sure. I normally like to get home around 9:30 because it's important for me to have breakfast with my wife. And then I often see my kids off to school, and that's often something that I also cherish and I enjoy doing. And then I go into town around noon, 1 o'clock, and I usually catch up with old friends. We have a couple of drinks, we catch up on old times, we share great stories. When my kids come home, I'm there to be able to hang out with them, and then I usually spend the evening, we play like board games and we just have fun in general. But I like to spend time with my family, my friends, and just enjoying myself. And then the businessman asked the fisherman, have you ever considered fishing all day? And the fisherman looked and he said, I haven't. And he said, why would I do that? He said, well, if you fished all day, then instead of getting one boatload of fish, you would have 6 boatloads. And then you could expand your business. And he said, well, why would I want to do that? And he said, once you expand your business, you can hire multiple people, and then you can make a ton of money. And then the fisherman is like, okay, and then why would I want to do that? And he's like, well, once you have all the money, then you're able to have the freedom to kind of live your life exactly how you want. And once you have all that money, then you're able to cut back to fishing only from like 5 to 9 a.m. And then you can have breakfast with your wife, see your kids off to school, hang out with your friends and catch up on old times, and then you can even be at home and hang out with your family early each afternoon. And the fisherman looked at him and he said, that's exactly what I have right now. And the businessman looked at him and he said, yeah, you're right. See, oftentimes we think that we have to have all of this money to be able to live a certain life. But the reality is, most of the things that we would cherish in life, we can actually do that today. And it's important to be able to have that shift, because the reason that most of us have difficulty spending money is because we know what it costs us to get the money. We know that a $10,000 trip, well, that's really expensive because, that's 3 months of my salary. That's 4 months of my salary. I don't know how many months, 1 month of your salary. You would say, well, I don't want to do that because that's such a long amount of time. Like, how could I trade 1 month of my life for 1 day of some sort of a vacation? But if you're able to separate your money from your time, and you saw the time as just what you do with yourself each day, well, then you're able to say, well, I can spend the money because the money isn't really that important. My happiness, I've tied so many things up already. Now, granted, there are expenses. You are going to need to be able to have the money to afford certain things in life, but money is about comfort, not about happiness. The happiness, that comes from what we do each day. And Happiness by Design, it's a great book, and it talks about that. It said, look, at the end of the day, you're going to be happy from pleasure and purpose. How much of your time each day do you spend on pleasure versus how much of your time do you spend each day on purpose? If you have the right balance, then you're going to be happy. That leads us very nicely into the first aspect of your retirement planning guidebook, and that is the financial planning. The financial planning is, what type of lifestyle do I want, and what does that actually cost me? Let's go ahead and put numbers, pen to paper. Let's see exactly what it costs. And then we know what our goal is. You'd also need things like your time horizon. How long can I leave my money invested to be able to afford the freedom that I'm looking for before I need to spend the money? Generally, I tell people if you want to have the money in the stock market, you need to be comfortable leaving that money alone for at least 5 years. At least 5 years. Because the way the market ebbs and flows, if you're just looking for 1 year, I can show you the charts where it will show that you have the ability to gain or lose 100% of your portfolio. But if you're willing to leave your money in all the way up to 20 years, that the amount of loss is so insignificant that you actually are just talking about, am I going to lose a little bit of money or am I going to gain a very large investment, a very large return? You're not as much at a risk of losing all of your money when you leave it in the stock market for 20 years. Now, granted, we know the market goes up and down. We know that I can't make any guarantees, but I can say, statistically speaking, the longer you're willing to leave your money in the stock market, then it usually works out in your favor. So once you know how much your expenses are, then you need to know what my income is. Now, your income, most of you are starting with active income or business income, which is fine. When you start with that, then you'll say, okay, this is the amount of income I have. These are the expenses that I have. What is the amount of money that I plan on having when I retire? Do I want to have 80% of my income because that's what most people have? Or do I plan on actually spending even more money than I am right now because I plan on living in this fabulous villa and kind of really going for it? Well, then maybe you need to plan for 120% of your income or anywhere in between. We would then be able to say, based on the age of retiring, how much Social Security you'll have, and we'll talk about that later in this video. And then once you have all of your assets and all your liabilities lined up, we can then figure out what your net worth is. How much do I have left over when I subtract all of my debt, from student loans to whether they are yours or your kids, to the debt, the house, and the other bills, the cars, the trips, the credit cards, everything. Once we take how much money I'm making, how much money I have saved, how much I have invested, what my house and my car and all my investments are worth, and then I take away all my liabilities, what is my net worth? Once you know your net worth, you know how much income you have, how much expenses you're going to have going out, you know the type of income that you want to have for retirement, and you know at what point you want to retire, what age you'll be. You can then start layering in some of your goals. And this is the very early going. We'll flesh out the goals in this retirement planning guidebook, but you just want to be able to start listing some of the goals. Hey, what are the top 20 things that I would love to do with my time? What are maybe the 5 things that I always wanted to do and I just put off because I was being responsible? Who are some of the people I would like to meet? What are some of the causes I want to support? List all of your goals and let's put a year next to it. Do you want to do this in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years? And then we can put the plan together to help you accomplish each of those goals. But it all starts with financial planning. If you do not put a roadmap out, then it's like driving without your GPS. You're just saying, I don't know where I'm at. I don't know where I'm going. I'm just going to drive and hope I get there. You wouldn't want to drive in the car with someone who just made that kind of a statement. You want to know exactly where you're going. And if you've ever used a GPS, you know it requires the GPS to know exactly where you are right now. So once we get a picture of where you're at right now, once we get a picture of where you're going, we can then put the directions in and create the exact route to help you get to where you want to be. If you're planning for retirement, then you will find value in our free retirement planning guidebook. You can find the link in the description below. In it, I'll go over the 10 steps that anyone needs to do to make sure that they do not run out of money in retirement and that they're not worried about what to do with their time, where they get to enjoy their retirement, because money equals money and time equals experiences. Again, if you want to download your free retirement planning guidebook, is our 2023 Ultimate Guide for Families. You can find the link in the description below. The second part of your retirement guidebook requires you to choose the best retirement plan for you. I'm going to go over the 8 most common, most successful versions. The majority of Americans have what is called a 401k. That is a pre-tax, which means that the money goes into that investment before it is taxed. As a result, it means when you take the money out in retirement that the money is then taxed. It is very rare, dare I say impossible, for Uncle Sam to not tax you at least once. But if we do our job right, he will only tax you once. If we don't do our job right, he's going to tax multiple times. He's going to give us lots of penalties. He's going to keep taking multiple cracks at the nest egg. But if you play your cards right, he'll only tax it once. So if you have a 401k, the beautiful thing about that is most people automatically enroll through their employer. They're able to put a percentage of their income in, and you're able to have some sort of a company match. and that's free money. Most retirement plans, they're going to tell you start with the free money because that is an automatic return on your investment. If you invest $1,000 and your company matches you with $1,000, that is a 100% return on your investment. Now, you and I, we go around, we look, how do we make this? And then when you invest all of that money, now you have the ability to make even more on top of that 100% return that you start with. So most people start with their 401k or like a 403b, something very similar. If you work in the public sector, the 403b is very similar. These are what we call defined contribution plans. And as I mentioned, these are pre-tax plans, which means they're not taxed right now. The money goes in tax-free, which then means you possibly have a tax break today because you're not claiming it as income that's going into your retirement account. The second most common account is if you don't have access to a 401k through your employer, then you would have a traditional IRA, an individual retirement account, IRA. So a traditional IRA works pretty similar, exactly like a 401k. The benefit of an IRA is you have a lot more customization because there's a lot more investment choices. When it comes to your 401k, some of the downside is the requirement by law for a 401k is generally, do I have a conservative investment choice? Do I have a moderate investment choice? And do I have an aggressive investment choice? When you have your own IRA, you have the ability to customize and choose so many more stocks. Now you can have lower fees because you can choose different index funds and ETFs, or you're able to pull the money that you have in these different jobs that you've had over your career, and then you can put them all inside of your IRA, so that way you don't have multiple accounts to manage where you have a 401k here and a 401k there, you have a few thousand here, a few thousand there. But if you're able to pull it all into your IRA, well, then now you can keep track of everything. And normally the fees are going to be much lower than a traditional 401k account. The third best retirement account is called a Roth IRA. The difference between a Roth IRA and a traditional IRA is a Roth IRA is considered after tax. So that means that that money was taxed today, and then you invest it for the chance to take it out in retirement tax-free. That is really nice. We want to make sure that some of the money that we have isn't going to be taxed in retirement because we don't want to be paying taxes in retirement. Now, granted, I do know that people generally say, well, if you defer taxes today, then when you retire, you're going to have lower income. So the ideal situation is you're going to have less taxes when you retire. And while that could be true, it is not as much of a slam dunk as it was in the 80s when the 401k was first introduced. In the 80s, we used to get taxed upwards of 95% of your income. It was on a scale, but you could have 90% of your income taxed. As a result, if you made $100,000 in the 1980s, I think you would have been taxed at maybe like 55%. And so if you were to forego those taxes and put that money in your 401k in the 80s, and then you were to retire today at the historically lowest tax rates we've ever had, well, that would have worked very well. You would have went from paying 55% in the 80s to paying probably like 22% today. So that would have been a slam dunk. It would have been a great decision. The issue is we're already at historically low taxes today. So you may be foregoing paying taxes at 25% to possibly pay taxes higher at maybe 50% in the future. So you do want to keep that in mind. And that's why most of the time I tell people it makes sense to have some money in the pre-tax, have some money in the after-tax, have some money that's already been taxed so I can get it tax-free, and then have some money that I am going to have a tax break today and then I'm going to pay taxes in retirement. Just don't have all of your money in the pre-tax, and then you really can't put all of your money in the after-tax, but you don't want to have to worry about either. Now, there are limits when it comes to each of these accounts. That's usually why it makes sense for most people to have a mixture of all of the accounts that I'm going to go over. So your 401k, that one has the largest, where you can invest $19,500, I believe is where it's at this year. It could be at $20,000. It goes up incrementally, but you can invest about $20,000 inside of a 401k each year. Now, when it comes to your Roth and your traditional IRA, they share about $6,000. You can invest $6,000 between the two of them each year. And what that means is if you put $6,000 in your Roth IRA, then you can't put any dollars in your traditional IRA. If you put $3,000 in your Roth IRA, then you can put $3,000 in your traditional IRA. They share that $6,000. So you can't put $6,000 in your traditional IRA and then put $6,000 in your Roth. And so as a result, if you put $6,000 a year each year, then that's probably not going to be enough for your retirement. So you can't only have a Roth. Even though I like the Roth a lot, you can't only have a Roth. And then once you're having your kids gone and all those financial decisions, you're paid off your debt, and then you're able to invest even more, the 20,000 in your 401k may not be enough either. So it's good for you to give yourself as many options as you can, and then we're able to craft the plan. And we'll go over that later in this retirement planning guidebook as well. The fourth retirement plan is the pension. Lots of people used to have pensions back in the day, and it was very nice. So it was basically how long you worked at a company based on some sort of a formula, also mixed with the amount of income that you have. They will tell you how much money that you're able to get every single month for the rest of your life when you retire. And so a pension, you end up continuing to get a check the rest of your life. Now, that doesn't happen as much anymore. There are some changes in the laws where the government had this idea where they said, you know what, let's protect people's pensions by requiring companies to have a certain amount of money that's set aside for the pension fund, which you and I would say, well, that makes sense. That sounds like a good idea. The issue was most companies felt the money that they had to set aside was so burdensome that it made better financial sense for them to forego the pension, and then they could reinvest that money in their business and work on increasing their profits, et cetera, et cetera. As a result, the majority of companies do not offer a pension today. You will find that most people who have pensions work as a teacher, a firefighter, police officer. You'll find that they work in a government agency of some kind. They may work for the railroad and have railroad retirement, but you're going to find that it's not that many sectors that offer pensions anymore. That is unfortunate, but at the same time, you have other options available. That leads into the next one, which we call an annuity. You can have a guaranteed income annuity, which you have two ways to fund it. One of them is called a lump sum, and it's a single payment. In Florida, our teachers, they have a drop program. So they would receive a large amount of money after their retirement, and then they can put a portion of that in an annuity and turn it into an income the rest of their life. That is a single payment, large lump sum annuity. You also have what is called a deferred annuity. And that means I know I want an annuity, but I don't have a large lump sum, but I'm going to put $1,000 here or $5,000 there if I get a bonus or whatever is going on where you just fund this annuity. And then when you're 2 years out from retirement, you do what is called annuitizing, and that's just locks the annuity, so you're no longer allowed to put money inside of it. And then a year later or 2 years later, they will then start sending you the check the rest of your life. I mean, at the end of the day, a pension and an annuity, they're the exact same thing. For example, if you've seen your pension where you have the option to choose a single life annuity, then you'll know that you get the most money with a single life annuity or a single life pension. And all that means is it's based on one person's life. When the one person dies, the annuity is done, the pension is done. They don't pay your spouse or your children or anything like that. You have a period certain annuity or a period certain pension where you may be like, look, I've been working so long, I have my pension. I don't want the money to just kind of go away if I died accidentally tomorrow. So how about you give me a set 10 years or a set 20 years of payments, and if something happens to me, then you'll give the rest of the payments to my spouse or my kids, whoever the beneficiary is that I set aside. And then the last option, which lowers it the most, so if you had, let's say, a single life annuity, maybe they give you $2,000 a month. And then if you had the period certain annuity, depending on the period, maybe they give you $1,500 a month. And then if you have the joint annuity or the joint pension, and sometimes they call it the like I love you clause, because you're making sure that your spouse is taken care of, where you would say, okay, I'm going to get $1,000 a month. So I'm giving up about $1,000 a month, but the benefit is me and my spouse are going to receive this check the rest of both of our lives, which is pretty nice. Now, there are other versions where you can have it where maybe my annuity is me and my grandkid. And obviously that significantly lowers the amount of money that you get, because the idea of your grandkid or your children, they're going to live a lot longer. So because it's an insurance product, it's based on the life expectancy. And so you do have that option to where if you really like the pension, where you're like, you know what, Dre, you've gone over everything and I just feel so stressed about it, I think I would rather just dump my money in an annuity. The only concern about an annuity is they don't often keep up with inflation. And so if inflation is about 3% every year, a guaranteed income for life annuity may give you 2% a year. Like, it's not really going to go up to keep up with inflation. That's not what it's designed for. It's designed to make sure you have a check the rest of your life. Now, there are some other versions where you can have like an index annuity, and sometimes that works for people to where the fees are still pretty reasonable, but they allow you to take advantage of some of the upside of the market. And so you're able to say, okay, well, now my regular annuity with my safe investments that obviously the insurance company does for me, they're going to give me that 2% every year. but they allow me to take part in the index fund. So if the stock market was to return another 5%, well, then my annuity now has 7% growth. And if it was to lose money in the stock market, I would just have that 2% floor. So I wouldn't lose money with it, but I do have the ability to take advantage of some of the upside. Now, you do want to keep track of the fees because there's a variable annuities. There's so many different kinds that you don't want to have all of these fees and riders built into your annuity to where it's literally like you're being charged 20% of your portfolio every year. Like, you don't want that. So you just want to have a professional look at it. And if you like reading that stuff, that's fine. Obviously, you can read it, and then you can ask the questions. Hey, what does this end up costing me each year? Because they'll tell you, oh, this will guarantee this will guarantee that, but guarantees cost someone money, and whoever's taking the risk, that is the person that's normally going to be compensated for taking the risk. So an insurance company is saying, you take the risk of this annuity, they're going to compensate you for taking on some of the risk by having lower fees. And the opposite is true. If you have the insurance company taking on all the risk, then they're going to charge you the fee to compensate them for taking on all the risk, because you're going to get that 2, 3, 5%, whatever it's been designed at every single year, and it's on them to actually make that money in investing. If they don't make that money investing, then they lose money. They still have to pay you that same whatever percentage out. And so normally they're going to compensate themselves to make sure that the numbers still match up. That leads us pretty nicely into permanent life insurance while we're talking about insurance companies. Permanent life insurance or cash value life insurance, whole life insurance, what they do is they take your monthly payment, and then a portion of that goes towards the fees, and then a portion of that goes into the cash value. Now, this is a strategy because it takes so long. You have to start it kind of early because you have to be healthy enough to be able to prove for it, and you have to know that you're going to have a certain amount of money that you really need this advantage of having tax-free income. So if someone said, you know what, Dre, I don't think I'm going to qualify for a Roth because of the limits on a Roth, which I think are at 198,000 this year for an individual, and I think it's about 200 and maybe 36,000 or something like that for a couple. I'll double check the numbers to get them exact for you. But if you didn't qualify for the tax-free money in retirement in a Roth, then you would say, okay, well, I want the tax-free money through permanent life insurance. And then you would have to put the money in for probably 10, 20, sometimes 30 years for it really to work. It does take a pretty good amount of time for the cash value to accumulate inside of it for you to be able to take money from it. But the benefit is anytime you do need that money, so because you have this diversified set of income, if the stock market is going down, you don't have to take the money out on the down year. You could take the money out of your annuity, or you could take the money out of your cash value. You would have that option. You don't have to take the losses. And so as a result, you can allow your stock investments to grow, as usually within each of the market downturns, within a few weeks, you will see that you have your best day. Now, it's not to say that the market completely recovers, but it is to say that there's usually a significant swing, and that's why we normally call it volatility. It's not that it's always down or it's always up. It's that is traditionally it goes up, but there are times where it goes down, where you have 1 year out of every 10, you may have a recession, and you end up losing a significant amount of money. But usually after that, you have a nice bull run because everybody's like, okay, well, this is the bottom. Things are going to get better. And if you have your money in the stock market still, then you can ride that wave up. But you have to have some way to keep food on the table, and that usually becomes those other options. But again, those would almost be considered an addendum to your retirement plan. It's usually not the first or the second choice that you would do, but it is something that is an option for some people where it makes sense. But I have often found that it makes the most sense for people who have a lot of money, and so they have places where they want to diversify their money because it can work. The numbers can make sense. Where to someone who is uncomfortable investing in the stock market, so an annuity as risk protection may help them to increase that comfort. The last two retirement plans are your real estate or your business ventures. There are many people whose retirement plan is solely to run a business, grow a business, to sell that business, and then that money is going to be their retirement. There are other people who buy real estate to rent it out, to have a income coming in every month for rental income. The benefits of these two options is they usually offer better leverage of your money. If you were to buy real estate with 20% down, you then have that 100% of the property worth at your disposal. Now, of course, you took a loan out, so you have to cover the loan when you sell it. But if you were to pay $20,000 down to buy a $100,000 house, you now have $100,000 of assets. And you have an $80,000 loan, sure, But you can then make decisions with that home. You can improve it, you can upgrade it. Maybe it goes up as the markets go up. And then when you sell it for $150,000 in a year or 2 or 3, you're able to make that return even though you only invested the $20,000 initially. So even though you invested the $20,000, you're able to sell a property for $150,000, and then you're able to make that $50,000 profit, and you can move on and keep flipping houses. Or the same as with turning them into rental properties, to where you put the $20,000 down, and then someone is paying you $2,000, $3,000 a month in rent. Even though you only put $20,000 down, you're able to generate $2,000 every single month in rent. That is a pretty good return on your investment. You have better leverage. The same is true with a business. Depending on the type of business that you start, some of them have very low cost of entry. Some of them are a little bit more expensive, but you sometimes can start a business for $10,000, $20,000, and then you could make that and more in your first year, where you have doubled the income that you invested, to where you invested $20,000 in a business and that business made you $40,000 the first year. That is a significantly higher return than you'll most likely get in the stock market. The only issue that most people have is this is sometimes very active income. It's not always very passive. Sometimes you can have someone run your company for you, or you can have someone run your properties for you. But usually in the early going, these are pretty active investments. So they're not really passive. If you love them, great. Naturally, you also have certain risk that's associated with it. I think like 90% of businesses fail in the first 5 years. So you have that risk also that you're dealing with. But as far as the leverage, it's a great leverage. The only other concern that you might also have is the cost of entry is much higher. You could technically put $5 in a stock today and start investing and growing a fund. You probably won't buy any properties or businesses for $5. Depending on your time horizon, which is how long you have until you retire, and like your risk portfolio and the return that you need and the income that you need for retirement, you can choose 2 or 3 of these different retirement plans and then craft your own. I often encourage people to have something that's in the pre-tax, have something that's in the after-tax. I usually tell people it makes sense to have a business if you are passionate about that. If you're not someone who enjoys selling and talking and meeting, then the business may not be for you. It's not to say that you couldn't find a business option, but it is to say it may not be for you. And then oftentimes what people will do is, as your money grows in the stock market, because it has such a low cost of entry, you can then take out some of the money and invest in a property when it makes financial sense. And then you can have diversification of your income streams that way as well. Also, I've seen people where they invest in REITs, real estate investment trusts, in the stock market, where they invest in the different companies. And so they're able to check off a lot of these different boxes, but they still maintain all their money in the stock market. It really just depends on you and what makes the most sense for you. But I do often tell people it's a good idea to have something that you put your money in pre-tax. It's a good idea to have something that you put your money in after tax. And if you're very concerned about longevity, right, living too long, you're very concerned about the stock market or the risk of different investments, then you can put your money inside of an annuity, or you can focus on your pension, however you want to do it. But just keep in mind that an annuity generally does not keep up with inflation. I don't know if you know, but 65% of millionaires have at least 3 streams of income, according to the IRS, which means that if you want to be a self-made millionaire, then you would want to have multiple streams of income. The majority of people have active income, where you get it from an employer, where you work and you work a certain amount of time and they give you a certain amount of money. The second most common is people will have business income, profits from your business. And that's just after you take your revenue and you subtract your expenses, your profits is what you're left over with. You have royalty income. So maybe you have an invention, maybe you have a patent, and you're able to leverage that to be able to generate income, where you allow other people to use your patents, your ideas for their own company. The fourth one is going to be your interest income. So that's going to be money that most of us get when we put our money in like a CD or a money market account or a savings account. While it's not usually a high return, it's very safe. You put $1,000 in, you'll probably have $1,001 in a year. It is very unlikely that you would have $999 in a year. When you put your money in those type of investments, they're just very safe, but they do generate income, and it is considered a stream of income by the IRS. Your fifth stream of income is going to be your investment income. That is going to be normally your dividends from your investments, capital gains, that's when you sell your investments, and then the last one is going to be your rental income. You could technically rent equipment, but for most people, that's going to be rental income from real estate. When you have those 7 streams of income, you don't want to stay in only the earned income. You want to be able to diversify your income streams. As you add multiple streams, you already know the magic number. 65% of millionaires have 3 streams of income. Number 4 in our retirement planning guidebook is to future-proof your retirement plan. If your retirement plan assumes that it's always rainbows and skittles and that everything is going to go perfectly, then you don't have a plan, you have a wish. And we can't wish for our retirement plan to go perfectly. We have to plan for what is inevitably going to happen. And what does that look like? You have things like a disability where maybe something happens where we can't work. And our plan required us to work for an additional 10 years, but something happened that we could not work and make the same amount of money that we used to make. I had someone who was an engineer, and I forget the exact disability he had, but he could no longer work in that type of capacity anymore. And the issue for him was the work that he could perform paid him maybe half of what he used to make. And if you have disability insurance, then you're fine because they're going to cover the income. And then there's a couple versions of disability insurance. Is it any job that I can't do for it to kick in, or can I just not do my physical job that I used to do, and then that kicks it in, where you can make these changes, but you want to be prepared. How else can you future-proof? You have to look at what's the likelihood of financial catastrophe, and can I do something to prevent it? When you're younger, your most valuable asset is your future income earning potential, which is why most people have life insurance when they're younger. Now, as you get rid of debt, you may say, all right, I don't need my life insurance anymore. That's a you choice. You're future-proofing, so you may want to have the life insurance to make sure that there is no financial catastrophe if you or your spouse passed. You have recessions sometimes. What are you going to do if there's a recession? Do you have all your money in real estate? Because the real estate market normally goes down with the stock market. They don't normally go the opposite direction. So do you have something that goes up in a recession when other things go down in a recession? Right? A lot of people like to invest in gold. I'm not really here to pitch on gold, but you have to have something that you're comfortable with when we're in a recession, something that you know will go up. You want to be prepared for it. If there is a chance of you getting fired, do you have an emergency fund in place so you can pay your bills while you're unemployed? Do you have long-term care where you don't have to be put in a nursing home when you get older, and you're able to make sure that you're taken care of in your own home with the dignity that you deserve? Do you have these plans in place? This is how you future-proof. There is a certain percentage of likelihood of something happening. And each of us, it could be different, where you may say, well, everybody in my family dies at 60. Okay, well, if everybody in your family dies at 60, then we should plan for what happens if that happens. And then also, what happens if we don't? I talk to people all the time. They're like, well, I had this one friend's cousin's dog cat's uncle who, when he was going to retire at 70, he passed the day after he retired, so he didn't get to spend any of his money. And that's not going to happen to me. From the second I retire, I'm going to take my money as soon as they let me take it, which, right, is neither here nor there. But what happens if you were to live to 100? I often feel that most of the time people are retirement planning, they're planning for an exact specific situation, and they're not really planning for those other possibilities that could completely ruin your retirement. Where you have everything set up where if I work this long and I pay these bills and I make this much money, everything goes perfectly, and you get this stock return and all my investments in my real estate and my business sells for $30 million, I'm going to be able to retire perfectly. And I'm like, okay, well, what if the business collapses? Do we have any plans for that? Do you have key employee insurance, or do you have the attorneys and the wills? Do you have the living trust? Have you told the people that would watch your kids that if something happens to you, they're going to be the ones that watches your kids? Have you written this stuff out? That is what future proofing is. You just take the worst case scenario. What would be the worst thing that could have happened yesterday? Then ask yourself what you wish you had today to deal with it. And when you write those things out, then put a plan in place and then start accomplishing those things so that you can future-proof your retirement plan. Number 5 is my favorite. That is your ideal retirement lifestyle. I told you I was going to come back to your goals. We can't forget the whole reason we're doing all this. We're doing all this so that you can have a certain lifestyle. And I don't know if that lifestyle is you staying in your house or selling it. I don't know if that lifestyle is you living in America or going to Costa Rica. I don't know what that lifestyle is, but you need to. Does your lifestyle require you to travel all over the world, or are you going to sit at home on the porch and read a book? Does your lifestyle include your spouse, or does it not? Does it include your children, or does it not? Does your lifestyle have anything like a dog, a cat, a boat, a car? Like, what does your lifestyle have? Ideally, I would tell you to list out 50 goals that you have for yourself. Just 50 things that you would love. It could be people you want to meet, places you want to go, things you want to do, causes you want to support. Just list them out. Just keep writing all these 50 things. I tell my clients all the time, don't forget your dreams. So write down all your dreams, every single thing that you can imagine that will make your life absolutely amazing, and then decide what time frame is likely for you to accomplish those things. Is it going to be realistic in 1 year, or is it realistic in 10 years? Is it realistic in 5 years? And then once you have those set out, now you have your lifestyle, now you have the roadmap, and we're going to go add that to our overall retirement plan. And then we'll be able to say, all right, how much money do I need to accomplish that? And you'll find that a pretty good amount of these items, you don't need any money. You just simply need to allot a certain amount of time. When you think about your health and your wellness, does it mean that you need to go jogging, or does it mean that you need to go hiking? Are you accounting for these things? If you retire early because you're someone who's like, Dre, I'm out. Well, what are we going to do about your health insurance? Because most people will get it through their employer. Are you going to go on the Affordable Care Act exchanges, or are you going to find someone that can give you private insurance? If you're close to retiring and you're a little bit older, are you going to wait till 65 to take advantage of Medicare? Or like, what are you going to do to make sure that your retirement is absolutely beautiful, to where all the things that you want to do, that's what you line up each day and do, where you're excited. The way I would describe it is every single day feels like a Friday, to where my kids, they know that Friday is their favorite day of the week, and we call it Fantastic Freedom Friday. And if you ask them, they'll say, well, I like Friday because I don't have any responsibilities. I don't have to do any homework. I can go light on the chores. When I come home from school, I can kind of relax, watch TV, play games. I can kind of do whatever I want to do just for that moment. We also normally order out, so we normally cook food at home most of the time, but we'll order, pizza or some takeout or something on Friday. And so the kids really like it. So imagine if every single day was like your Friday, to where every single day you did exactly what you wanted to do. You had the freedom to do what you wanted to do, with whom you wanted to do it, and when you wanted to do it. That is the retirement lifestyle that we're looking to design. So take your time on this one and really enjoy it, soak it in. Number 6 is navigating Social Security and Medicare. Social Security, we have no idea if it's going to be there, but I think right now Social Security is projected to go bankrupt by like 2035, 2037. And so most people know that means we have to figure something out. And exactly what that is, whether you're going to raise the age or you're going to decrease the benefits, the reality is that there has to be a change that's coming. More times than not, people ask me, Dre, do you think Social Security is going to be completely gone? It's going to be $0. And I generally would say no, because you are paying that in taxes. What most likely would happen is the Social Security office can't increase the retirement age. That would be an act of Congress. But what they can do is decrease the benefits. And that's probably what they would do. They would change the benefits of what you would get from Social Security. So it becomes a decision of how much you want to rely on Social Security. I think something about 40% of retired Americans, all of their income comes from Social Security. And the numbers even higher for just where the majority of their income comes from. The good news is, if you have a plan in place that allows you to not take the money out when you can, like when you take the money out early, but you wait until full retirement, and that age differs for each of us. And I'll put a chart up that shows as far as what age you would need to be fully considered fully retired based on the year that you were born. But once you're fully retired, if you forego each year that you're allowed to go into Social Security early, it's like increasing your return by 8%. So you have an 8% growth in the income that you would get each year. I believe on the average household gets about $2,000 a month in Social Security. I believe that's what it is about average, and that's just slightly above the poverty line. So it becomes very tough to manage your overall household off of just Social Security, and it becomes very important to have a retirement plan in place that supplements it. Now, ideally, if you at least were able to wait until you were considered fully retired, well, now that number is much higher because it's increased by 8% every single year. So if you're not someone who's older where you're able to retire maybe 66 and a half, you are someone who has to wait till you're 70. So normally at 62, you're able to start taking advantage of Social Security, and then increases by 8% each year you don't take it. And then when you're 70 years old, that's when it's considered fully retired, and it doesn't really go up anymore. Now, there's some nuances. For example, if you started taking Social Security, but you also kept working, to where the money that you're paying in taxes, it can recalculate what your Social Security payment would be. And I've seen it where that number goes up for some people. But once you're 70, it really doesn't make any sense to not take it. Like, you waiting another year doesn't change anything. The amount fully invested is the amount fully vested. But you have to decide what makes the most sense for you. Now, you can go to the Social Security website and you can take a look at your estimated payout of what you would be getting. It's just mostly based on the number of years that you work, how many credits that you accumulated. And so if you had a job where you haven't paid much in taxes, then you're probably not going to get much from Social Security. If you haven't worked at all, then maybe it's your spouse that you're going to use their Social Security, which is also an option. But it's just based on the certain number of credits that you get based on how long you've been working and how much money that you've made. When it comes to navigating Medicare, that one's a little bit of a different animal, but it's equally complex and can be rather confusing. The most important thing you can do first for Medicare to make sure that you don't have those extra penalties and the cost is to enroll on time. So 3 months before you turn 65 to 3 months after you turn 65, that is that 7-month span that you have to enroll in Medicare. Even if you don't plan on doing anything with it, you do want to make sure that you sign up on time so that you don't have those extra penalties and the higher fees that you would end up paying. We'll talk about each of the parts. So there's 4 parts of Medicare. So you have Part A, and that covers the hospitals. So Part B covers your doctor visits and your outpatient services, things like your blood tests, your x-rays, things like that. This is the one where it could increase your fees if you weren't enrolling on time. So if you didn't enroll in that 7-month period, Medicare, they'll increase it by about 10% every 12 months that you're late in enrolling in it. And so you do want to make sure that you at least enroll in it on time, even if you don't plan on doing anything with it. And Medicare Part D has your prescription drug costs, and Part D has some of those same fees when you enroll late. So those ones are a little bit tighter, where it could increase your prescription drug premiums by 1% every single month that you're not enrolled on time. After you've enrolled in Medicare, it's pretty important that you choose your doctors very carefully. So you have participating doctors, which is pretty nice. It just means whatever Medicare pays, that's what they charge you. So whatever Medicare covers, that's exactly what your fee will be. And so you don't really pay anything out of pocket outside of your just monthly premium. So that's kind of nice. You have non-participating, which is a very fancy way of saying those doctors will accept the Medicare payment, but they're allowed to charge you up to 15% more than whatever Medicare is. And you would pay that out of pocket. And the third one is opt-out, which is just a very fancy way of saying that those doctors are not in the Medicare program. They don't care what Medicare charges because they're going to charge you whatever they have already set in their mind, and then you're going to have to pay that. There is no help for Medicare for someone who's opted out. It's important that you understand your doctor's fee structures and how they charge, whether they accept Medicare, whether they're participating, non-participating, or opted out. If you're planning your own retirement and you want to make sure you don't make any mistakes along the way so that you can enjoy your time retired and that you don't worry about running out of money, then you'll find value in our free retirement planning guidebook, the ultimate 2023 guide for families. You can find the link in the description below. The 7th part of our retirement planning guidebook is your tax planning strategies for retirement. We've talked about them a little bit, where there's different taxes for different retirement plans. If you are living off of investments in the stock market, well, that's going to be taxed. If it's been in there over a year and a day, that'll be taxed as capital gains, which is normally going to be around 15%. So that's a much lower tax rate than most traditional incomes. If your whole retirement is in a pre-tax plan like your 401k or 403b, that means that you haven't had that money taxed yet, and it's going to be taxed as ordinary income as long as you take it out after the 59.5. If you have a Roth IRA, that money was already taxed, so it's considered tax-free in its withdrawals. If you're in that select group that we mentioned that maybe it doesn't make sense for you to put money away in a permanent life insurance product, well, the money that you put in there, since it's after tax, the money inside of that is generally considered tax-free as well. And then also has the death benefit for your legacy planning, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But you have to be able to put your money in the buckets, where you basically have a bucket that's like tax now, you have a bucket that's tax later, you have a bucket that's tax-free. And then you just list off the products. See how much of your income is coming in each of these 3 buckets. The money in your tax now bucket, that's normally going to be your CDs and the investments, where as soon as you get the money, it's considered income today. That could also be the work that you do from your job. That money, when you get it, it's considered income today. It's taxed today. Your tax later bucket, that's going to be your pre-tax investment. So that would be anything that's like your 401k, your 403b, some annuities depending on how they're structured, some pensions depending on how they're structured. That would be the money that's going to be taxed later. So that'll be in your retirement. You would expect to pay taxes on all of those investments as ordinary income. And then your tax-free or tax never, that's normally going to be money that you have tax-free in retirement. So your Roth IRA would be considered tax-free. Some investments in municipal bonds, those are considered tax-free. The important thing for you to do is to divvy out your money in each of these buckets. And if you feel like you have too much of your income coming from any one bucket, then you can adjust them. So you can say, well, I need to move something out of my tax later because right now I'm going to pay a whole bunch of taxes during retirement. And I think it would make more sense for me to pay the taxes now. So you move some of your investments from the tax later into the tax now bucket. So if you were to convert some of your traditional IRA into your Roth IRA, well, that money would be taxed as ordinary income, but then you've moved it from the tax later to the tax-free bucket because you paid the taxes now. You could do the same if you felt like you were paying a bunch of taxes now, but you didn't have enough that you were deferring to the future. So you may say, all right, I'm going to stop investing in my real estate ventures and I'm going to invest in my 401k. As a result, you have now shifted some of your income from the tax now bucket to the tax later bucket. And once you have the right balance, it's your job to maintain that and then to evaluate it periodically because things change, situations change. You may end up becoming the CEO of a company and you make $1 million a year. Well, if you pay taxes now, you pay taxes later, you can only put so much money in these pre-tax investments, so you're probably going to pay most of your taxes now, so you don't really have to worry about it a lot. And the opposite is also true. If you were making a bunch of money and now you're making no money because something happened, the poverty line, generally speaking, you're not going to pay taxes now or later. And so where you put your money at, if you're not making any money, that's up to you. You don't have to really be stressing out about it. More times than not, people are talking about raising taxes on the wealthiest. It's very rare that people talk about raising taxes on the poorest. So that normally means you don't have that struggle. So it normally means you don't have to take that into consideration. I do think it makes sense to plan for where you are going. And so you may be in a situation where you don't have the money being generated right now, but you know you're on the right path. So I'd say build the good habits. Go ahead and start putting the money away. Have these buckets set up so that way when you get the money, you don't even have to think about it. You already have the bucket set up and you just move the money into each of the buckets. Number 8 is the 5 best withdrawal strategies. It makes no sense to have all this money if we can't spend it. And when you retire, that's when you get to spend your money. This actually freaks out people the most. You may be surprised, but this actually freaks people out the most is when do I spend the money? How much can I spend? Am I going to run out of money? Will I mess this up? I've been working for a long time to get this right. And now you want me to spend the money? Dre, I don't want to spend the money. I think I'm just going to keep working because I feel safer working. I'm getting my income in, I'm getting my check in, I got my friends, I got my relationships. I'm telling myself whatever I need to hear to be able to be comfortable with that idea. And so I don't want to have to withdraw the money, but that's okay. All that means is you're not confident or comfortable in the withdrawal. You haven't really talked about it. But once we talk about the 5 strategies, you'll probably be able to say, you know what, it's not that big of a deal. I can choose the one that makes the most sense for me. The most common one that you probably heard is maybe like the 4% rule. And all that means is whatever your investments are, you're going to take 4% out of your investments and use that as income each year. So if you have $100,000 in income, 4% of that would be $4,000 a year. That's what you would live on. Now, most of us can't live on $4,000 a year. So if you had $1 million portfolio and you lived on 4% of that, that would be $40,000 a year. Maybe that works, maybe that doesn't work for you. But the idea is whatever my income is, I'm going to live off of the 4% rule. And then I'll go from there. Some people like the 4% rule because all you have to do is to generate a return of at least 4%. And as a result, you're just living off of the interest that your investments are making. You're not actually touching the principal. The 4% can be tough if you don't have a large enough portfolio to where you're not really able to have a livable income. The second withdrawal strategy is the fixed percentage. So if you didn't feel great about the 4%, what you may decide is I'm going to take a certain percentage that's based on whatever my return is, let's say. So if my return the previous year in my stocks and my investments was 5%, then I'm going to live off of 5% this year. And then next year, whatever my return was the previous year, I'm going to live off of that. So if I got a 2% last year, well, now I'm only going to live on 2% this year. I'm only living on a fixed percentage. This doesn't work for a lot of people because it's hard for them to plan their income because their income is always adjusting. But if your returns are really high, then you don't really have any problems at all. You feel really good about it. But the idea is I'm not going to touch my principal. I'm going to maintain that by living off a fixed percentage each year based on last year's returns on my investments. So you're forcing yourself to only live on the return of your investments, while the 4% return could have possibly been dipping into your principal because you have the set amount that you're doing every single year, or you may have been leaving some of the money on the table, and as a result, you're actually growing your principal because you're not using all of the money that your return is. But if you were getting a 4% return, then it would be the same as the fixed percentage return. The big difference between the two is in one, you have the 4%, and I've even seen it where some will say you have the 4% and then you increase it by a percentage or two, or maybe inflation every single year. So you start off with 4% and then increase by inflation every year. I've seen some that just do the fixed percentage to where they say whatever my last year's return is, that's what I'm going to use, and that way they're comfortable knowing that they won't run out of money, but they're uncomfortable with the income that they're going to have. So that is the trade-off. The third one is your systematic withdrawals, which is a very fancy way of saying that you live off of your dividends. So you have built a portfolio that most of the money is being generated in income producing investments, and then you live off of the income from those investments. As the dividends get paid out, that's all you live on. You don't do anything with the principal. Just like the other ones, this requires you to have made this decision slightly early on because you would have to be focusing a little bit more on the income aspect of things. But if you do have the REITs and you have the dividend paying stocks, you could have a pretty sizable income that comes in just based off of your investments, and you never touch the principal. The fourth one is the 3-bucket strategy. And the 3-bucket strategy, you basically have one bucket that's considered your conservative bucket. That's generally going to be the money that you live on every day. That could be your emergency fund. That could be the bills to keep the lights on and the food on the table. That is your first bucket. That's your conservative. That is going to be either in a savings account or a money market account or a CD. It's money that you plan on touching within the next 1 to 2 years. And that money is just that. You're not worried about any return on that. That is the money you live on. The second bucket is more your moderate bucket. That's going to be the money that you're not going to be touching for maybe 2 to 5 years. That's going to be somewhere around there. I've seen somewhere the middle bucket is higher than that, but usually 2 to 5 years is a good range. And the second investment is going to be your relatively moderate returns. This may keep up with inflation. It may be slightly below inflation. So you probably going to have some bonds in there where you have some debt. You may have some pretty safe investments, maybe in a CD or something like that. But you're not really focusing on the return as much. Ideally, it keeps up with inflation. So this money is growing, but it's not a heavy risk. You could have your moderate investments in here. Some people want it to be slightly more aggressive. So maybe this is your 4% returns inside of this fund, and then you don't touch this from that 2 to 5 year span. And then the third bucket is going to be the money that you don't plan on touching 5, 15 years. That's the long-term investment money. That's going to be your most aggressive money. This is the money that you're going to go for. Every amazing stock and home run that you've heard, I'm just kidding. You're not going to be like unreasonable with it, but you are going to be shooting for the 10, 20% returns on this. This money, you know, is in the stock market over the long term, and historically speaking, over the long term, the stock market goes up as long as you have the time in the market. And so you have your aggressive approach. The idea of the bucket is when the stock market is going crazy, you don't have to take your money out because you're living off of the first bucket and you have at least a year or two worth of your expenses in that bucket. And then in your moderate bucket, you refill your conservative bucket as the time comes. But because you have 1 to 2 years, you are now covered for some of these unforeseen events in the stock market. If all of your money was in the aggressive stocks, then you're just playing Russian roulette. You hope that you retire at the right year, because if you're a year off, then it's all gone and you have to work another 5 years. I've heard it. I've seen it. If you are right on time, then you retired and you never run out of money because it was the best bull run ever. Every year you had a 20% return on your stocks. Life was great. You couldn't spend it all. I've seen it. I've heard it. It works both ways. If you don't want to be gambling with your money as you near retirement, you have that money that gives you a 10-year span, right? So over a period of 10 years, you're looking for a reasonable stock market time to take the money out. And then you move it into so you sell the stocks and you move it into your moderate kind of save. You buy like bonds and CDs. And so that's your moderate. That's your 2 to 5 years. And then when the time is right on those, you move it from your moderate into your current daily living expenses, your emergency fund, and that's your conservative. As a result, you now have a 10-year span of being able to access your stock market versus someone who's all their money is investing. They don't have that same ability. Whenever the stock goes down, they still have to sell because they're living off of those investments. And the last withdrawal strategy is called the fixed dollar amount. And it's just as it sounds. I'm going to live off of this set amount of money, Dre, no matter what's going on in the market. And if I'm dipping into principal some years, I'm dipping into principal some years. If I'm growing my portfolio because I'm living less than what my return's getting me, that's fine too. But I have a certain amount of money that I need to maintain my life, and I'm going to get that amount of money to maintain my lifestyle. The main concern that you would have with a fixed dollar withdrawal strategy is you don't know if you are dipping into your principal. And as you dip into your principal, it becomes harder to maintain your retirement. Because if you're getting a 10% return on $1 million, that is different than getting a 10% return on $900,000 or $800,000 or $700,000. And as it keeps going down, as you keep spending the same amount, it is increasing the rate at which your portfolio is decreasing, if that makes sense. I know I said it kind of in a funny way. And the only other concern that you would have with a fixed dollar amount is you don't know if you're actually keeping up with inflation. If you're living off $50,000 a year, maybe that is a good amount this year, but is that a good amount in 10 years? I don't know, because inflation, that may not get you everything that you normally were able to purchase. And it often makes sense if you're just nervous about the returning in the stock market and you just want to have a little bit of comfort of knowing you're getting the same amount of money each year. And that's usually when that withdrawal works. Also, if you're very confident that you're spending less than what your portfolio is generating, then you also don't have that concern as well. And so it works for people who normally know that they're spending less than the amount they have, so they're not worried about dipping into their principal. Number 9 in your retirement planning guidebook is legacy and incapacity planning. And your legacy is, do I have a trust? How am I leaving the money for the kids? Am I comfortable with my kids? Do I have a will in place? Am we splitting everything evenly amongst my kids? Are some of my kids too young, so I have to have a trust in place? Because your kids can't accept the money from you, right? They can't enter into a contract with the government because they're not 18, so the government won't give them any of the assets that you left them. Do you have someone to watch over the kid? Does that person know that they're going to watch over the kid? Does the kid know that they're going to go with them if something was to happen? What are we doing with our real estate? Because those are sometimes hard to split up. If you put the real estate in something like a trust, then you can have it set up to where some of your kids get income from the real estate, while the other kid, once that's paid off, will get the actual real estate because they want to keep it, build like a family legacy. Is there a nonprofit that you always take care of, your church or a cause that you believe in, and you want to make sure that they're set properly? You want to leave something for them. There's so much that goes into legacy planning, but it always starts with just having a will. Just have at least a will to say where your money is going to go. I think that's a fantastic place to start. And then we can talk about what trust makes the most sense for you as far as determining how that money is allocated, how it's given out. You don't want your kids arguing and fighting in court, swearing they'll never talk to each other again. You don't want to leave that kind of a legacy. You want to leave a legacy that shows your family that they were very valuable to you, that you took care of them, and they're going to be able to move on and transition to much better than if they were trying to figure out how are we paying for this? Where's the money at? I don't know. Dad never told me. Mom never told me. I have no idea where the money is. I'm not sure what we could do. I don't know how many insurance policies they have. It would be good if you could just list off all of your assets, all your benefits, and probably have a family meeting. I know it's not the most fun thing to talk about, but if you want to be able to successfully leave your legacy, you're going to want to have these conversations. Most people will tell you that splitting things doesn't work very well. Giving the asset to one person here, giving this asset to another person there, and giving a different asset to the third, fourth kids, that normally works better. But I find that if you have the proper communication, it increases the likelihood that the transition goes well. Imagine anything that you've done in your life where no one ever talked about it, right? So no one ever talked to you about college. No one ever talked to you about school or graduation or your first day at work. You just showed up and they expect you to figure it out. It'd be a very hard transition for you. Well, unfortunately, that's what we do with death. We don't talk about it. Nobody knows what's going on. We just hope that they figure it out. Well, that's not how we've done any part of our life. We get a little bit of training. And whether that training is a video because you're uncomfortable talking about it, because technology's gotten a little bit better, but ideally your family, you go on a cruise, you go to someone's house, you have a barbecue, and then you have a family meeting before or after, and you just kind of lay things out. This is how we're going to do it. This is how much we have. This is what we did to get it. This is what's important to us. what's your thoughts? And, hopefully it goes well. Obviously, some people, it's not going to go well. It never goes well. And I get that. But you're going to do everything that you can to make it as easy as possible. Now, the only other issue is not about dying. Sometimes it's about living, but it's like our cognitive abilities are getting slower. We talk slower, we think slower, we process things slower, and sometimes we are unable, almost like a heavyweight boxer, to where someone on the outside can look and say, yeah, he seems to be a step slower. He seems to be taking more punches. He seems to be getting knocked out a little bit more, right? He's not as sharp as he once was. But the boxer always sees himself as, well, I just had a bad day. I can do a different training. I'm going to get back on this. They always are the last ones to know that they should retire, that their time has come and gone. And so we have to have something set up to where we have a limited power of attorney, where we have certain situations where we're able to take care of incapacity planning, because you see it. You talk to people, and it just seems like it's just like something, just like they have to work harder. I think that's probably a good way to describe it. It's like they have to work harder to do the same functions. It's not that they're not sharp, it's that they have to work harder. They have to work so much harder. And so as a result, it's just good to have incapacity planning, because as we deteriorate, we just need to already know. We can't make the decision then. We need to have someone that we can set up, because I've seen it where someone will have a whole bunch of bills signed up, monthly subscriptions, and the kid's like, what is all this? And the parent's like, I have no idea what that is. I talked to a nice person here or there. I don't know. And then you end up having to call and cancel all of these subscriptions because they were being taken advantage of. And so if you have it to where you already have a limited power of attorney, it makes it so much easier for your family to take care of you. It is a pretty big decision, so I do expect you to take your time on it, but it is a decision that you have to make, and you do want to make sure that you take care of that. You want to make the transition as easy and seamless as possible for your family. You don't want to have spent decades building certain bonds with your family, teaching certain values and morals, and then it's all gone because there wasn't enough communication. Communication is always number one in proper legacy planning. I've seen it with businesses where the parents want the kid to keep the business, and the kid is 1,000% going to sell the business because the parents never talked to the kid about business, never took him in the office, never communicated the value of the business. The kid just thought they were competing with the business, and so they resent it. Same with real estate or anything else. If you want to tell your kids this is important to us, this is our legacy, don't sell the property, and you give them a plan in some way, tell them to pay the taxes, for crying out loud. If I had $1 for every time the government's taking someone's property that's free and clear because they didn't pay $1,000 in taxes every year, you really will be surprised at what will happen if you don't take the time to plan it ahead of time. You have gone through the transformation, you have the wisdom, and you want to share that wisdom to make sure that your kids make the best decisions possible. And last but not least, you want to put it all together. You have a whole bunch of information all over the place. You put some pieces here, some pieces there. Don't shove all this information in that one drawer that has all the bills that we don't go through. Don't shove it all in the shoebox where I'll get to it later. You want to take this and put together your retirement plan. You want to have the money set up. You want to have the investment set up, the legacy, the goals, the whole reason we have the money, what freedom looks like and happiness, success and wealth. What is your retirement number? You want to be very comfortable and confident in that number, and then you know that you'll be able to live in your retirement and have the best of experiences, and you don't have to worry about paying Uncle Sam too much. You don't have to worry about your kids fighting. You don't have to wonder if your kids are going to be okay. You don't have to wonder what you're going to do with your house, or if you have enough to be able to eat out a couple of times or to take that trip. You know, and you have that confidence, and you know for sure that your retirement plan is set up in a way that regardless of what the future holds, you have a plan for that. Because as I've told you from the beginning, it's about more than riches, but you've often heard me say there is a plan for every season and a process for every result. I have yet to find a situation that isn't possible to overcome. Even the most dire of situations where you're looking at the Great Depression, as awful as that was, as scary as I can imagine. I mean, my grandmother, I remember when she had passed and my mom was talking about her having money in mattresses and in the closet and different things because, Granny lived through the Great Depression. She didn't trust banks anymore. She wasn't playing with banks. And I can't even argue with it, because sometimes I'm looking at the banks and I'm like, I don't know if I trust banks either. But that was something that she went through, and that was how she dealt with it. But isn't it also true, as bad as the Great Depression was, that there were people who made more money than they've ever made in those years? Of course it's true. They had a different plan. Same with the Great Recession that we just had in 2009. 67% of the stock market lost value. I think it was something like that. But yet it's also true that there were people who made more money than they've ever made in their life during the Great Recession. Same with COVID. Bill Ackman, he was notable of that. I think it said that he invested like $16-17 million against the stock. Like, he shorted it, saying that the COVID was going to ruin the stock market essentially. And he was able to make like $2.5 billion with a B dollars. So he made more money than he ever made in his life from COVID. Now, I'm not telling you to go short a stock, but I am saying that if your retirement plan is future-proof, as we mentioned, and you have taken care of all of these situations, you will always be in the best position you possibly can. It doesn't mean you'll always win. It doesn't mean everything will always be rainbows and skittles, but it does mean that you're in the best position that you can possibly be in. If you like the video, I ask you to like and subscribe, and feel free to check out other wisdometric videos if you're looking for ways to eradicate financial stress, generate passive income, and build a prosperous retirement strategy.